Welcome to the Complexio podcast. Complexio is the intelligence layer for enterprise AI. It automatically builds a connected understanding of your business to automate workflows across people, processes, and systems. In today's episode, we will hear from Danny Lange, president of Complexio. Danny shares his perspective on one of the biggest barriers to enterprise AI adoption, trust. We discuss the concerns executives raise around data protection, the fear of black box systems, and what it takes for leaders to trust AI with the most sensitive parts of their business. Danny also explains why unstructured data is an untapped source of enterprise value, how Complexio safeguards corporate IP through fully isolated instances, and why organizations don't need heavy data preparation to get started. His insights show what responsible AI adoption looks like when security, provenance, and governance are built into the foundation. All right. Good morning, Danny. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing fine. What about you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I've got my coffee next to me, so I'm feeling good and ready to get into some exciting topics today with you on trust and data and all of these exciting topics. So I thought we would start off with talking about trust in AI, because I'm sure you have a lot of experience with this, but there's been enterprises want to get AI into their companies, but there's consistently a lot of concerns that get raised by leaders when adopting AI. And this is especially around how these platforms handle and protect their data. So in your experience, what have been some of these concerns that leaders raise?
Yeah, we have to remember that in this era of AI, your proprietary data is what sets your business apart. Yeah. So we have all these, various large language models that can help us, but they all sort of have this. They're trained on the same internet. Yeah. So they all have the same knowledge. So what really differentiates one business from another is their proprietary data. Yeah. So if you're a business leader using AI and read the press, you start getting concerned that if you send your data into a large language model, what happens to your proprietary, your trade secrets, your secrets in your data? What happens? Yeah, and the fear is reasonable. Yeah, because there are companies out there, and it has been in the press that if you have a personal subscription to things like ChatGPT, yeah, it's like your data is also being stored at OpenAI. Yeah. So what we have to look at here is to have enterprise leaders understand that there's also an enterprise version of AI where your data is being fed to the model, but not kept, not stored, not used to retrain the model. Yeah, because if that was the case, your data could very easily end up in a response from a prompt from a competitor. Yeah, if the model sort of retains your information. Yeah, so in a real enterprise world, AI is a brain, but it should not have that it should have a proprietary memory. It shouldn't use your data to be better.
I think that kind of comes back to, I know you've raised in previous podcasts about how we put more trust in our people than maybe we do the computer. But in the same way, a human can go and talk about or sharing the data and the proprietary knowledge. But we do put a lot more concern into how our computer systems handle it. And I do agree with you that it's important. What would you say are some of these fears that are being raised, which are actually unfounded, and which ones should leaders pay attention to more?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that large enterprises who provide these services. So we're looking at Google, we're looking at Microsoft, OpenAI, looking at Anthropic. They all now understand that they have to have enterprise versions of their systems that really protect the customer's data. Yeah, it is becoming a sales point. Yeah, which allows us to actually safely use these models under those circumstances. Yeah, so the whole industry is moving towards that protection of the data, because it is really the number one enterprise concern with AI right now.
Fair enough. And we think of AI as kind of these black boxes, as you're saying. They are starting to move forward, and we're starting to get a little bit of development in it. We see it in, again, I'm referring primarily now to LLMs, but I know AI is so much bigger than that. But if you interact with an LLM, you can see kind of the reasoning it went through. It might not always be it will be more of a highlight reasoning, perhaps, but we're starting to get accustomed to seeing how did an AI get to that conclusion? What is it about this fear of a black box, and what do you feel should an enterprise AI system expose for leaders to be able to trust it?
Yeah, I think you brought up sort of the human aspect a moment ago. I would say there are a lot of similarities. Think about how often in corporations you have review meetings. Yeah, you ask, a team to come up with a solution to something, and then what you have a review where they basically present the solution and you ask questions as a leader. Well, it's the exact same thing with AI. You write a prompt, simplified, you write a prompt, it gives you an answer, and now you say, hey, how did you actually get to that answer? Yeah. What is the source of the data you use? Do those sources, those citations, do they look real? Are they valid? And you sort of dive in and you look both at the sources, you look at the reasoning. I tend to think of this as there's a famous concept called the 5 whys. You basically ask why until you sort of get to the bottom of it. Yeah, and that's something that has come out of human interactions. This is a good procedure in a meeting to dive deep and understand not every aspect, but to understand whether the team actually have a good understanding of their own solution that they're proposing. Yeah, it's exact same with AI.
And at Complexio, we do present that already in our solutions, and we talk a lot about provenance and governance. So first off, if you can define what is exactly provenance and governance, we have been hinting a little bit to it, and how does that come into the way that we operate at Complexio?
Yeah. When it comes to data, then provenance is about the origin of the data. That's what I mentioned: the sources, the citations, where did you see this? Show me where you saw this. Yeah. And governance is basically you can say it's the access control to the data. Yeah. And at Complexio, these two concepts are super important to us because we are sort of diving into the deep secrets of a company by looking, by having the system analyze the process and workflows. Yeah. And number one, we need to understand what data we are looking at to work safely with those data. And then we also need to understand who can access this. Yeah. Because we may, in the process of coming up with a workflow, with a solution, there may be, HR data involved. Yeah. That maybe not, probably not everybody in the company should be able to see. Yeah. But they may be a part of the process. Yeah. So what we're doing is that we're looking carefully at what kind of data we're accessing, what the rights are around that data, and basically make very sure make very certain that you can sort of show the reasoning, how you got to that solution, but also that you're not exposing data that not everybody should see.
And we talked there about, not exposing data internally between people that shouldn't be seeing it, but coming back to sort of the point that we started off with about not leaders being able to trust that this data actually stays within the company, because Complexio does access everything. So what do we have in place that can assure leaders that actually their data is not going to be leaving the company?
Yeah, so we basically do not share any of the data between customers. There are, if you look at many services out there, both consumer services and also a lot of enterprise services, they have some fine print in the license agreements where they basically, you allow them without actually really be aware of it, that they sort of use the aggregate of the data. Yeah, we do not leak the data between customers. We do not use the data between customers. Yeah, we completely silo the data and the analysis going on with a given customer.
Yeah, so you can really trust that it's secure, it's safe, but also everything that gets shown to you is actually yours. All of the automations, and there's nothing where again, I think we've left hallucinations behind a little bit in terms of AI concerns, but you can trust that there won't be any of that here as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's good that you raised that because it is sort of a two-way street. Yeah, one thing is to the concern of leaking data, but the other concern is that somehow the data you get has been influenced by either data from a competitor or how should I put this? Data that basically reveals some IP that you're not, that if you use that, you're in trouble. Yeah, so that's why these silos are super important.
Again, coming back to how Complexio operates versus sort of the general market, what would you say these issues of trust and data sharing, they're real, and it's definitely something that every AI provider for enterprises need to address. But how is it holding back the general market in terms of adopting AI into enterprises?
I actually think it's holding back the market, yeah. And how should I put this? It is, leaders should have that concern. They should ask those questions, yeah. And there are definitely companies out there that kind of really want to aggregate all the data because it could make their job easier, yeah. We have from the very beginning been keenly aware that we are really looking at these highly unstructured but highly confidential messages that is flowing in a company that we can use to help the company run faster and better, but we have to really protect that information. Yeah? That there's you cannot have you cannot have a single mistake there. Yeah, and that is built into our foundation, into our DNA.
And how would you already did a bit there, but these questions that most leaders have about AI, what would they be, would you say? And how would you answer them from a Complexio perspective?
Yeah, I think that it's important to understand that Complexio is, we're using a brain to analyze, to digest all this information, but the brain is very unique for each customer. Yeah, it's not like you sort of take that and bring it over to the next customer. It's completely isolated, and I think that is important to message that to the business leaders. Yeah, because you don't really want to sit out on the AI revolution because of if you wrongly believe that your data is going to be leaked. Yeah, I mean, like, that trust is so important. At the same time, you also need to really ensure that you're not sort of looking back and say, well, we'll keep doing this the manual way because paper is more secure than anything else. Probably not true, actually. But that's really sort of the challenge that leaders have, and we need to ensure they fully understand that we take the secrecy of the data very, very important.
And that's how we've approached it from the start, with being developed within different R&D partners that we have. So Complexio can really showcase that actually there has been no leakage. As you have mentioned previously, it really was something that came in right from the beginning. Why is this not necessarily the norm in the industry today?
Because AI has been characterized by being fast and furious. That you have 3 months to bring a product to market, and you cut a lot of corners, and it looks very exciting. And there has been a lot of examples on AI products that sort of the strength of the product itself is that it learns from everybody who uses it. Yeah, and if that's kind of a recommendation engine at Amazon or something like that, yeah, it's kind of, you're able to answer questions like, people like you, what else do they buy? And we kind of like that help, and we accept that Amazon is doing that Netflix is doing that. But when it comes to corporate IP, to corporate proprietary data, we look at that and say, well, that's not cool. Yeah, we don't want to help the competitor to better understand, our business.
Yeah, no, and it's a good distinction, which you also made earlier, that what we have available for consumers will not fit what's available for an enterprise. So having a platform that is developed from the beginning with the idea that data needs to stay secure, it needs to stay inside of the company, and it needs to be applicable for the company and how it can use it. We have spoken a bit about, but I just want to again go deeper into this idea of Complexio being on isolated instances and just really learning from the company itself.
Yeah, I think that it's very important. We talked about sort of not learning across companies, but learning within the company is actually very important. It's not it's understanding these workflows is not a static one-shot process. So when we run, an isolated instance for a certain customer, there's also a long-term memory there. So you keep aggregating the knowledge and the improvements. There's sort of a virtuous loop where you improve processes, you learn from that, the system learns from that, and it can continue to optimize those processes. Yeah. So it's very important that we understand that we isolate between customers, between corporations, but within a corporation, it's very important to have that long-term learning take place. Yeah. It's basically not, we are not like a consulting agency that comes in or analyze, write a report and leave. Yeah. You go in, you analyze, you optimize, and then you keep optimizing and improving. And the businesses also change gradually, a little every day. They change, they get new customers, they get new products. And so your isolated instance becomes a very valuable brain for fine-tuning your business over time.
I think you mentioned about AI models needing to be quick at coming out with new, but in the same idea, which you just raised, enterprises need to also be able to quick and adapt themselves, but they need to still feel like their foundations, what they have running inside of the company, very much solid and safe as such. But it is, I liked what you said about the consultant that comes in, or in general, anyone who comes in and looks at a company and say, okay, this is how we're doing processes today. And then if you give it a week, give it 2 weeks, give it half a year, that process will have changed completely because of different tools and new data as well that comes in. So maybe with more traditional approaches, we know that previous set of data was secure, but the new that comes in, we also need to feel reliable on that being secure and safe going forward.
Yeah, I think there are many examples of that kind of dynamic concepts in the world. You go to the doctor prescribes you something, and then they check you to see how it goes. Or you make it, the moment you make a decision, it may influence your particular workflow or one customer. What you may not understand is that next week it will will impact the rest of the company. So that's why, from Complexio's perspective, we keep watching and we keep basically maintaining a dynamic understanding of how your business is running, and are able to adapt to the changes that either we kind of generate by optimizing. That happens from the business side when you have new products, new customers. You cannot look at businesses in a static world. And I think that software has for the longest had sort of software and software developers have for the longest really had this idea that you can sit down, write code, test it, deploy it, and you're done. Yeah. AI gives us some new capabilities here to be much more dynamic.
Yeah, which then, as you said, with software developers, they'll create something, and up until now, the enterprise has been very fragmented in how it works. It's silos between departments, silos between technology, which we have mentioned previously, causes a lot of frustration for the employee, but it's also just in general frustrating because you have data spread out in different places. And this data then, sometimes it can feel very overwhelming for a company that feels that they do want to explore AI solutions in some way, but they've heard that, okay, we need to be ready for it, which involves data cleaning or something else like that. But it also is our team actually ready for getting this in, whether installing it or just being ready to use it? What is it that people tend to believe that they need to fix before getting AI into the enterprise? And why is this not necessarily the right approach?
Yeah, you're bringing up a very important point. AI is a disruption. We have for decades thought of data being the thing that you store in databases. Yeah, and there are some big vendors out there. They have done this for 40, I think 40 years now that you put your stuff in relational databases. It's columns, it's rows of data, and that's how deterministic software really likes to deal with data. Yeah, and it has for the longest been basically just like accepted as almost like the law of data, being that if it's garbage in and garbage out, and it has actually been true for many years. AI is different, yeah. AI is much more like the human brain. We see patterns in all the noise. We can separate a conversation in a group of people. We can have a conversation with one person. We're good at ignoring the rest, yeah. And AI is a bit like that. And if you go to the sort of typical IT department, they still think in rows and columns. And I don't blame them, because that's what we have all been trained to, yeah. But now you have a large language model that can look at a Slack channel, it can look at an email, it can look at a PDF document, one page, it can look at 100 pages, it can look at photos. It's crazy. It can take audio in and make sense of it, or actually say there's no sense in this. So it's a game changer, and I think a lot of companies are getting into the trap of we just have to do all this data cleaning. We have to do all this work first. What I want to say is that instead of data cleaning, it's a bit more about data governance, and data provenance. We talked about that earlier. It's important to understand what data you want the system to take into account and work on, yeah, rather than the structure of it and the cleanliness of it, yeah. And I think we need to educate the world a bit to start looking differently at data.
You mentioned relational databases. Now there are lots of different databases out there as well, but why might just having a different kind of database is not enough? That's sort of been sold as a solution beforehand. Of course, as you mentioned, AI is the brain, and that makes sense of it. But if someone thinks, oh, well, we have a graph database in place, or we have some other sort of, why is that not enough?
Yeah, but that's because it limits our thinking. There are so many new applications you can do where you can throw a handwritten invoice into an AI and it makes sense. You just couldn't do that before, yeah. You can take a picture of something. You can do a flowchart on a whiteboard and you can take a picture of it and an AI will make sense of it, yeah. We have to start, sort of relearning something here. We need to train our brains to see these new opportunities, yeah. And I think it's if you keep thinking in rows and columns, you limit yourself in sort of this brave new world of new applications that can really help us move forward much, much faster, yeah. I mean, like, you take a picture of a machine and you ask, how should I operate this machine, yeah? And the AI will help you with that, yeah. That's a different kind of data, yeah. We're not used to that, yeah. We're not used to think that way.
And that, which you're talking about, I guess we can call that the unstructured data sources within a company, which we haven't used it as much because, as you have been saying, it's we can't put that into a row and column. But why is this such a untapped source of enterprise value?
Because it has been the proprietary domain of human workers, yeah. We would write notes, share notes. We would have a meeting just like we have a meeting now. But very soon, all of that, in some cases already happening, meetings will be transcribed. Meetings will be analyzed by AI and you will get a summary out of a meeting, yeah. There are action items in there. There's understanding in there between the people in the meeting that we, Complexio, can actually use to better understand and optimize part of the workflows and automate some of it. But it comes out of people talking to each other, and that has it has for a long time been our proprietary domain, and therefore been ignored by software developers because they really couldn't do anything with it. Yeah, we're in a very, very different world right now, and it has changed fast. Over just a matter of 2 to 3 years.
I like that idea of a meeting is part of a workflow, right? But previously, it wouldn't become a part of the workflow or the workflow that the computer could see until the people that have been in that meeting then go off into different applications, put the information into there, and the computer or the system would see that as a start. In the future, or as Complexio is doing it, you can say, the start of this workflow is this meeting.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You and I will have a meeting, we'll make a decision. Now, you walk over to some enterprise system and you type something and you push some buttons. Yeah, there's no track, there's no record of why you did that. Then someone will ask you and say, why did you send that invoice? And you say, hey, I spoke to Danny, we agreed to send it. Okay. But today that will be just between us, yeah? And when Complexio looks at that meeting, it will know why you. There will be a invisible link, thread between our meeting, our decision, and you go and push a button, and a customer receiving an invoice. Yeah, that will all be understood now. It really opens opens the door for using data that we never thought of. Just a conversation is actually data now.
So it creates a bit more, we mentioned the fragmentation in an enterprise, but with this thinking, with this sort of system as Complexio has, you're harmonizing all of this fragmented data and fragmented processes and all of this across the enterprise. We spoke about unstructured being sort of let's say the human element of the conversations, all of this that we cannot put into a row or into a column. Semi-structured, structured, that kind of falls into more of that category. If we see all of these data inputs as equals, which it hasn't been before, what does that change?
It essentially changes the way that business is going to be run. What we're doing at Complexio is that at Complexio we will tie together the actions in one or more enterprise systems, discussions between people, decisions being made, even verbally, yeah, then other interactions with the systems, things that were complete, like separate before, yeah. There will be no trace of why it happened except in our minds, yeah. Or maybe in a handwritten note or something like that, yeah? Or in a meeting note that nobody ever read, yeah? We tie all that together now, and it becomes something that a computer can analyze. It can be actually something that a management team can look at and say, that's actually how our business operates, yeah? So we make these intangible decisions that were being made very, very, very tangible, yeah? And then, at that point, you can start speculating about what to do with that. Now I understand it, I can automate it, I can improve it, I can decide that that's not the way we should operate our business, and so on. Yeah. So you suddenly create a whole new level of visibility.
And I guess also a whole new level of efficiency, because we've all had those days where we have meetings back to back and we say something in one meeting, but we never get the chance to actually go ahead and make the action that we promised that we would do. And we have that scribbled little note for ourselves that at the end of the day, we cannot ourselves remember what it was that we were trying to do in that meeting. With Complexio, as it will have access to the conversation through, say, transcription, or maybe in the future, just from being able to understand the actual conversation as we're listening in, it can take those actions ahead and incorporate them into the workflow as it knows this is what's going to happen from this meeting. So you create a little bit more of efficiency. And I guess, again, you bring back the trust both in people and systems by doing that.
Yeah, because now we talked a bit about provenance. Yeah, now you understand why did you send that invoice. I can go all the way to back and understand it. I can, maybe the customer calls back and say, why did I get it? And I know why. Yeah. It's a completely new level of transparency that it gives you. And of course, we all know that if you have that kind of transparency, that also allows you to now run your business better. We use the word optimize all the time, and some people may perceive that also in a negative way. Maybe I'm not trying to say, hey, we're going to optimize people out of this. No, optimize means we're going to run the business in a much more transparent and well understood way. Yeah, that is very important for all businesses out there to basically understand how they run.
Yeah, and I like what you said. We're not optimizing people out of it. If anything, we're really bringing people back into it, because it is less about a human doing a data input. It's much more about human being its own, bringing the skills that a human brings into this. Do you believe is this a unique approach that Complexio has, or what is it that would you say, again, with your amazing experience of this world, what is it that Complexio does so uniquely with this?
Yeah, we are at the absolute forefront. We saw these capabilities before most. I think as we talk here, I still think there's a lot of people who haven't really understood the change that AI enables. Yeah, so we saw that from very early on. We've used large language models to make meaning out of this unstructured data. We talked about messaging, something that has messaging in its broadest sense. Yeah, it's emails, it's Slack messages, it's notes, it's memos, a communication of all kind, and it's meetings. We look at all that, and that's not, most of the world is not there yet. So we have an incredible early lead in looking at all this data that a lot of people don't even thought of as being real data. I mean, like, is a meeting a Slack channel? Is that kind of stuff data? Yeah, kind of it is, but most people don't think of it. It's just something that happens in real time and then disappears. Yeah.
So it's that raising, again, the unstructured data to the same level of importance as our databases, as our other different applications that we have inside of a company. We've spoken about Complexio being skill-based and not sharing data between customers, even more importantly. What does it mean to create a platform that is skill-based? And what is, in terms of the general market as well, are they doing that?
So we had talked a lot about data, structured, unstructured data, a lot about workflows and processes and understanding. But at the end of the day, you want the system to help you do things. Yeah. And that's where the skills come in. Yeah. The skills are just as in kind of in the real world, they're like tools. It's something we use to accomplish something. Yeah. So what we are able to do is we're able to have certain skills like analyze an invoice, determine the PO numbers. It's like some very specific things that are created. It can be actually created using AI itself to deal with specific processes that needs to, or processes / actions that needs to take place in a given business. Yeah, a typical business have, 10, 20, 30 different kind of enterprise systems, and you have your CRM system and your ERP system and all that in crazy combinations. There are many different vendors, so you have all kinds of combinations of that. Yeah. So when we understand the workflows, we also want to have the tools in there to interact with these systems. Yeah. And they can be highly proprietary to a given organization, how they interact with these enterprise systems. Yeah. So one level is understanding the workflows. The next level is actually to do something to impact the world. And so we are not just analyzing stuff. We are also getting to the point of execution.
Yeah, which makes it, instead of being something that is applied in a certain vertical, which I think a lot of offerings out there now, they focus in on just one thing and say, we're going to solve this, we're going to create the best solution for invoice processing or whatever it might be. And it might be invoice processing for a certain industry only. But Complexio is agnostic when it comes to tools, when it comes to industries. which I guess is much credit to the skills-based application. But what does it mean sort of more like at a technical architectural level? And what does it also mean for enterprises?
Yeah, at a technical level, it means that there's actually code running here. Down at that very level, is we talked a lot about AI being very similar to sort of human thinking, really trying to understand these high-level concepts, understand workflows. But at the end of the day, what we do at Complexio is that we generate code, these tools, these skills that can actually go and update systems. We generate that and it runs, and it's a very important component because you don't just want to be the consultant who says, "Oh, this is how your business works. You could optimize here and there." Yeah. Now we actually want to be able to carry out certain steps of those workflows. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that requires code interacting with the enterprise systems.
Yeah, which is very, very interesting to see when it happens. And also, it's very uniquely to Complexio. It's done automatically from its understanding of the business. And how does that affect, say, I think often we think about, okay, AI, we're going to adopt it in something, large corporation, but Complexio might also work well for a small to medium-sized enterprise. So what does this sort of technical architectural difference that Complexio has, what does it mean for enterprises of different sizes?
Yeah, I think that if you take a small to mid-sized corporation, that is actually what very large companies are made up of. Yeah, so very large corporations are not just mega-sized organizations. They are basically composed of many small organizations. Yeah, and I think that by looking at interactions as we're doing here at Complexio, whether it's an interaction between 50 people in a 50 people organization company, or whether it's 50 people in a very, very large multinational organization, it's very much the same. Yeah, it's very much the same. And I think it's important to understand that the way that people work together, the way that we interact, the way that we communicate, and the way that we make things happen. I have been working in a startup. I have also been working at Google. Yeah, it's two very different places, yet my skills and the way I work is very much the same.
Yeah, you apply them everywhere. So for this, then I start to understand, but what is it that allows Complexio to then remain domain aware across industries, but without requiring the shared model training between two to be able to apply this?
That is a good question. And the point here is that what we do is that we, of course, analyze the workflows. We haven't talked much about it today, but we create a dynamic knowledge graph, which is really sort of mapping out the relationships between people and systems and documents and information flowing, so that we understand what we can call, business events. Yeah. And that is that's happening in any organization. Yeah. It doesn't really matter whether you are operating in one domain or another domain as a business. Yeah. But then what we do is that we then capture that proprietary information in that organization. It can be business plans. It can be underlying, documents explaining what is the aim of this corporation, what is their goals, what is it they want to achieve, what are their core principles, etc. Use all that, again, unstructured information, all that information that founders and CEOs and boards they have created. Yeah, use that information and pair it with your understanding of the workflows, and then you can help optimize and automate the work processes in an insurance company, in a logistics company. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And I guess currently enterprises are trying that because they're in their own way of combining specialized tools with legacy systems and the modern platforms. And we're trying to kind of create this jigsaw element, but it hasn't really worked so far. And it does also create a bit of a challenge for enterprise AI providers unless they have that access, right, to the whole unified corporation. But what do you see the main challenges for the enterprise AI industry as a whole in this kind of jigsaw that we're doing?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of the industry is that AI is actually the most dominant use of AI right now is just to improve very narrow and certain aspects of the existing workflows, like we use AI to write more code faster, yeah. But you still have a software engineer sitting writing code, yeah, deterministic code, yeah. It's like you use AI like the world hasn't changed, yeah. So we talked a lot about tools and skills. A lot of those tools and skills can be generated by AI, yeah. So you don't actually have a software engineer sitting and coding something in an old-fashioned way. The AI can code by itself and integrate that in, yeah. So I think I think sort of the state of the industry is more to use AI in sort of disjointed ways to improve certain steps. At Complexio, we are trying to look across the entire workflow, not just, improve one tiny bit of it using AI.
Which is great. And I think most of us have in some way interacted with AI today. And you get that frustration of initially thinking, oh, this is going to help me, but you also end up spending time correcting what the AI creates. So it becomes a little bit more, it doesn't relieve the workflow. It might add a little bit more to your day as an employee or just as an individual. But I guess, again, that comes back to it not having necessarily context, which is something that Complexio does have.
That's absolutely correct. What we are seeing, I mean, like, this is probably the 95% use of AI today. We call that kind of bottom up use of AI. It is company employees on an individual basis using AI in their specific workflows to do very specific tasks like writing an email. Yeah. And every time you write a prompt, you have to sort of explain a lot of context because the AI you use doesn't actually know your business. You use it. It's a step forward. It's better than not having it, but it's not a game changer. Yeah. It's not a game changer. And I think what we're trying to do here is to basically say, if you analyze and understand the whole business, then it can more than help you write that email. Yeah. It can maybe even, it can help you do your job faster, yeah, and better. But you don't have to sit and write long prompts and explain what is going to happen because it has learned that from looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, which is great. But you see that in some platforms where we integrate AI, say in Google integrates it across their platforms, Salesforce integrates it across their platforms, and you get it in kind of, again, isolated instances. What is it, in your opinion, why is it important that AI can integrate with these established enterprise platforms and also with new AI ecosystems, but without necessarily forcing exclusivity to one?
I think there's a statement that says that lock-in is the enemy of innovation. I think that, of course, many businesses, especially if you're a larger and a business that sort of dominates in your space, you like lock-in, yeah, because it gives you stability and security and keeps your customers stable. But it really sort of prevents innovation. We think it's super important to look at using the best models out there, using the best technologies out there. And especially these years, they're changing a lot. It's a constant competition for improvements. Right now, we are seeing models out there, GPT, we're seeing Claude from Anthropic, we're seeing Gemini from Google, and every other week there's an upgrade to one of them, and then it steps in front, and then the next one. And at Complexio, we want to look at those models and other models and say, whatever it takes to solve the task. Yeah, And you may be on one cloud service, you may be on another cloud service. We're not gonna move you around, and we're not gonna lock you in with a certain model. We are basically just gonna try to find the best model that works for your business.
Yeah, so we're kind of coming back onto the side of enterprises themselves rather than the providers. What does this give an enterprise, this agnostic intelligence that Complexio provides? What is the strategic importance of that for an enterprise?
Yeah, it allows you. It speeds up the transition. Yeah, often, and we have seen this repeatedly. There are technologies that are tied to a certain cloud provider. Yeah. And if you happen to be having your data, your systems on another cloud provider to adopt this new technology, they want you to move. They want you. They want you to migrate. I have been in my career. I've been migrating several times between cloud services, and it takes 6 months. It's very scary. It's a lot of work. And those 6 months, by the way, you don't do anything else, yeah? No other improvements, yeah? You just need to move over, yeah? That's not gonna fly in the future, yeah? So we will bring the Complexio intelligence to where you are. That's how it should be, yeah? So no matter whether you're running on one of the 3 or 4 big cloud providers, or you're running in a proprietary data center, we can come to you. We can apply our intelligence to where your infrastructure is placed.
You mentioned migration, which, as you said, is scary because there's a fear that some data might be lost in that, which with this sort of solution, I guess that kind of reassures leaders that some of that will not be lost because you have an aid in terms of migration. Or how would you see that?
Yeah, rip and replace is generally not a good idea. It's in the whole nature of what we're doing is to come in and analyze your workflows in your business on your terms. And I think that's the important part. We're not coming in saying, first you have to move everything over to this cloud provider where we are, or we run a SaaS service that basically forces you to do a lot of things that has nothing to do with your business, yeah. So we analyze the business on your terms, and that's where we wanna get insights. We wanna optimize and improve, and we wanna automate, yeah. And it's gonna be within your existing infrastructure, within your existing systems.
Just today, when a company it's much more spread out over different domains, different verticals. Like it's not as clear cuts anymore that you do this one single thing. Most corporations do a lot of things. So why is it essential then for them to have something like a neutral context-driven layer like Complexio when you span multiple stakeholders?
I think that the art of what we are doing is to create an abstraction, yeah? That is really capturing the genuine transactions between people and systems in a company. And we've talked a bit about this before, but it doesn't really matter. If you look around, all businesses, even in very different domains, yeah, are using a lot of the same methods, a lot of the same systems actually, yeah. Many HR, there are a certain set of HR providers, HR system providers out there. There are certain ERP system providers, etc. Yeah, that's number one. The way that people communicate using email, using messaging, writing memos, notes, meetings, happens in all companies. Yeah. So what we're doing is that we are focusing on those fundamental entities in running a business. And that allows us to go in and help an insurance business run more efficiently, or a maritime business run more efficiently. It doesn't really matter as long as those fundamentals that humans and computer systems, those fundamental interactions, that's what we capture.
So coming back kind of to what we started this conversation with the idea of trust holding AI adoption back for a leader who has had that fear, has now been listening to our conversation? What would you hope they take away from it?
I hope that they understand that we have been listening and we have had the same concerns from the very, very beginning. At the founding of our company, we had customers and partners that were very concerned about their proprietary data. That was the starting point. Yeah? And we addressed that from the very beginning. We didn't go out and say, let's get 100 customers on board and let's mix it all up and have a great time. Yeah, worked with existing customers and partners that had a real business to run and made sure that we would satisfy their very, very high requirements for protecting their data. And I hope that the folks listening to this conversation understand that that is basically a core part of our DNA.
Amazing. Danny, thank you so much. Your insights are always so valuable, and you have definitely enlightened not just myself, but hopefully everyone listening as well as to what is the difference that Complexio does when it comes to handling enterprise data and making sure that it's safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and it has been a pleasure.